game's over.
Welcome into Triple Zeros, the anti-hot take sports show. I am your host, Josh Buckhalter. Be sure to follow me on X at Josh G Buck, on Blue Sky Social, Josh G Buck with the little razzle dazzle at the end, Instagram, Josh G Buck, and also follow the show on those platforms as well at Clocker Sports. Also find that on TikTok and on YouTube at Clocker Sports. A lot to get into. Also follow the other show, Clocker Sports Podcast. We'll have more episodes of that coming up soon with more interviews with athletes, media, all that kind of great stuff. This here is my platform to discuss the weekly goings on for the things that I write, the sports that I cover, the teams that I cover rather, and we have a lengthy list to get through today, and so I said I'd be back with another roundup for Bears news. I got some stuff from the Broncos, the Vikings, also the Chiefs, Bulls, Hogs, who are on a very good streak. The Lakers are going the wrong way, and then a recap of some surprising NBA standings. So let's get right into it, man, and without any further ado. The Bears have a rather lengthy injury report going into their Week 14 road matchup against the San Francisco 49ers. But some of the key highlights that I did want to hit on, most importantly, the DJ Moore and DeAndre Swift are both listed as questionable. However, Coach Thomas Brown, interim head coach Thomas Brown, more about him in a second, did sound optimistic about both of those guys being able to play on Sunday. And also, we saw Moore in the locker room. He seemed to be in good spirits. Did not get the chance to talk to DeAndre Swift this week, but he also seemed to be all right when talking with teammates as he was in the locker room this week. So I would imagine that both of those guys suited up. They're questionable and got limited practices in on Friday. Brown said that they did do about 3 reps per drill during the session. So we'll see if that's enough to get them onto the field. They need them. They need both of those guys. They are trying to snap a 6-game losing skid right now, and so they need those guys. They will not have safety Elijah Hicks. He will have Jonathan Owens in his place for the second week in a row. Remember, Elijah Hicks is already replacing starting safety Jaquan Brisker, who has been out since Week 5 on the injury reserve or in concussion protocol, and then on injury reserve since I think Week 10, I believe it is, with that same injury. So he has not had any signs of movement in that regard. We'll see if that changes this coming week when I believe he's eligible to come off of injured reserve. Also, no Roshan Johnson. Wrote about that this week on clockersports.com. Darrington Evans has been elevated. I think that does bode well for DeAndre Swift because they did not elevate the other recent retread addition in Demetric Felton. That would leave, obviously, Evans and Travis Homer has gotten a lot of love this week about his ability to handle a heavier workload if need be. But because they did not add a third back to that group, which would have been Homer, Evans, and then Felton, I feel like that's a good sign for Swift's availability on Sunday. We'll see, though. Again, we haven't heard much other than those guys have a chance to play. Elsewhere, Keenan Allen, Darnell Wright, and Kevin Byard are all good to go. That's very encouraging. Like I said, Bears are trying to snap a 6-game winning streak against a 49ers team that is very injury depleted, something that was acknowledged by everybody in the building at House Hall today, or this week, rather. I'm going to do that a lot. But they also were clear to say they can't overlook a still talented, well-coached group. And so I think that's a very good mindset to have. But again, as running backs coach Chad Morton told me when I asked about Swift's availability, they need all the guys that they can get on the field as they try to get this ship righted. Some of the stories that I did cover this week on clockersports.com that I wanted to make sure I got out there and people went and checked out because I thought it was a lot of good stuff. Not to toot my own horn, I really think that there was some really good stuff from some of the players in the I guess a new era, not officially, but really a new era because it's a brand new experience for the entire organization, a coaching change in the middle of the season. So we got Tevin Jenkins talking about the head coaching search. Remember, he's going to be a free agent after the end of the season. Darnell Wright talked about how he really didn't pay attention to it too much. Gerald Everett spoke about what went wrong with Shane Waldron at offensive coordinator. That's all in one story. That came out, I believe, on Wednesday. Kyler Gordon talked about his no comment remarks after the Lions loss. I got him not to say, but I asked him about what if he had anything to add to that. He said no. He did, however, quote Jaquan Brisker's quote about God doesn't make mistakes, which came out, that post on X after Matt Eberflus was fired. So we also got to talk to Darrington Evans about his return to the Bears. This is his second or third stint. I know him and Felton have both been here multiple times. One has been 2, one has been 3. He talked about the circumstances not being the best, but he is ready to put in extra work if his number is called. Also talked to Jalen Johnson on Friday about his spreading the message of urgency throughout the locker room, and he brought up how he shares advice with young teammates Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon about their upcoming contract situations and how they have to just be on their best no matter what, because they are all re-auditioning for not only the current interim staff, but also whatever staff is in their long place. More about that exact point later on in the show. Then in that same piece on Friday, we also got the chance to talk to DJ Moore, and he did talk about the renewed energy in the group and said you could hear it. It's palpable, and said that it's like a new day for those guys. So very, very positive energy. And then on top of that, Brown spoke. I asked him directly about the historic battery that they have in place there with him at head coach, Caleb Williams at quarterback, offensive coordinator Chris Beatty, interim offensive coordinator Chris Beatty, quarterback coach Kerry Joseph, GM Ryan Poles, president Kevin Warren. You got Ted Cruz, the CAO, right? There's a lot of people in place there. It's a very all-black battery. Historic one for the Bears. They've never had that at the same time in franchise history. So he spoke very candidly about how he doesn't shy away from those types of things. But they are focused on trying to get this win and right the ship. And I'm sure they all hope secure a permanent situation, quote unquote permanent, as permanent it can be in professional sports situation with the Bears going forward. So a lot of good stuff this week on Clocker Sportsman. And I think that everybody should go and check that stuff out because it would help me out a great deal. So go ahead and do that. Check that out. Elsewhere around the league, still Bears related. The Rams, they are 6-6 this season. But we did get a raving review from Rams head coach Sean McVay talking about Thomas Brown, who was one of his proteges, a guy that he kind of kept close by him. Having really good intel that McVay thinks highly of Brown. That's not just lip service. That's real deal stuff. And he's got another coach right now on a similar path and plan. So kind of shows that there is a pattern that he followed with Thomas Brown that shows you how much he really does indicate, or that indicates how much he really does believe in Brown's ability to take over. Mind you, I am a person who has said that this should be Brown's job to lose. I wrote about that in Clocker Sports last week sometime, and not just based on anything sentimental, literally based off the reputation that he came in with and the response that he's already gotten from players and a lot of the vibes that you get. If you want to get sentimental with it, we can talk about the vibes that he also gives off. It's very Mike Tomlin-esque. I'm not even going to shy away from it at this point. There's the picture that I used for the article talking about the historic precedent, him responding to that. It's such a Mike Tomlin picture. Like, it just take a glance. Again, I'm pushing to the site, but that's what my job is. That's what I'm supposed to do. He looks like Mike Tomlin in the picture. It's the presence that he brings. It's not as fiery maybe, but that could just be because he's not entrenched in the role as Mike Tomlin is. I remember when Mike Tomlin got hired, it was a bit of a surprise because he had come from DB's coach to just getting that head coaching job and kind of stun people. Don't be stunned if surprise coaching hires go right, because we've seen this organization hire the name and it not go right. We've seen them hire the up-and-comer and it not go right. Now, granted, they didn't necessarily pick the one that everybody would have wanted them to in those situations, but they did follow those kind of bare bones guidelines or archetypes when they went and did their previous coaching searches. So I think that it should be Brown's job to lose. Point blank period. There's not too much else I think that I would say about that. That being said, there are going to be other candidates. They are going to conduct a coaching search, I believe, at the end of the season. One of the names that came up as an idea, urged to trade for type of thing from Pro Football Talks, Mike Florio, was a trade for San Francisco 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan. To that, Niners general manager John Lynch laughed it off, said that the idea was laughable, I guess, and Florio doubled down and said that really only matters what owner Jed York says. Now, that's all well and good. I'm not sure that the Bears, like, they're in a position where they got to go trade for a head coach. And I like Kyle Shanahan. I like the offense that he runs. I guess you could say that it would be an improvement for the Bears to get him regardless. So there's not really too many nits to pick there. You would just wonder about the not getting over the hump idea. But how much of that is on him? How much of that is on the horses? How much input did he have on what players were there? I'm assuming a lot. So I just don't feel like that's a path that would be viable for this team right now. This franchise that's already trying to fight off the idea that they don't make the wise decisions. Now, we've seen trades for coaches pay off, right? Sean Payton in Denver, which I'll talk about in a second, that seems to be working very well. That's one way that it could go. But for a Bears franchise that has not been able to get out of its own way, I don't know if following that path, trying to emulate that is the best path forward for them. So We'll see. We'll see. I just don't know if that's necessarily a viable option. Like I said, it's very interesting to think about, though, the idea that they could get Shanahan, who's on the Niners team that's 5-7 this season. However, they're not an old team by any stretch, and a lot of their regression this season is injury related. Everybody's hurt. All of their guys have been hurt or are hurt, and it's been to the level that they are running out wide receiver 3 and 4 in games. They're down to RB3 for the rest of the season now. I know Christian McCaffrey's out for the rest of the year. I'm not sure about Jordan Mason. They're in Isaac Guerrero territory. Like, it's been dire. Okay, so that's not necessarily a losing situation that I would see him trying to flee, especially because he's coming off of a Super Bowl appearance in 2023. So just don't see that one being one that goes about. The Vikings, though, 10-2, and the questions are, for me at least, will Darnold turn to a pumpkin? And the fear would have to be that it happens at the worst possible time. We've seen him have some struggles in games this season. They are still 10-2 despite that. So there's a good argument to be made that they can overcome that with the play of their defense and how their special teams can perform. I mean, we know they're coached well all the way around, so that's not a question of it. But I do wonder if, when it comes down to it, postseason time, more than likely, will Darnold regress? My gosh, I'll get the word right. Will he regress into the guy who was seeing ghosts while he was with the New York Jets? That being the case, Daniel Jones' future is also very intriguing because while he's backing up Sam Darnold now, and you would think, okay, well, he can hit the market next year, and he might be one of the top, rehab kind of target guys because he's still young enough. He's shown flashes of what he can do when he's locked in and dialed in and playing well. At the same time, a return to Minnesota would give him another chance to kind of rehab that image. Really, and I wrote about this for Heavy.com, I think that staying and coming back to the Vikings, because Darnold's probably going to price himself out of their range next year with McCarthy already waiting in the wings, and I think they got some defensive guys they got to extend. I know they got to figure out Cam Bynum. Byron Murphy still got a deal. His deal's about to come up. So they got to be economical somewhere, and I could see them letting Darnold walk and then letting McCarthy take the reins like he's supposed to, or seeing if Daniel Jones can do something and beat him out. Now, with the coaching that they have in place, it's not out of the question. But in that article for Heavy.com, it is talking about how the Giants made a bad bet on Daniel Jones and how it ended up backfiring on him. That's not going to happen with the Vikings. They're not going to do nearly as much damage to themselves if he does come back next season. It won't be for that kind of a massive deal that he signed with the Giants. I think it was $160 million. Signed him, or they cut him in year 2 of that deal. Big, second largest single season cap hit in NFL history, behind only Russell Wilson's cap hit from the Denver Broncos after he got cut from that 240. Like, it's not good for the Giants. It didn't look good on Daniel Jones. And then when you stack his numbers up against some of the competition, it looked even worse. Not just from his stats on the field, but also the money-wise. When you put him up with the other names, it did not look good for him. So I'm very curious to see how this all plays out for him and what he decides to do, because it took Sam Darnold 3 years, 2 separate teams, before he got another opportunity to start like this. Now, he did start in Carolina, but that was clearly not the same situation that he stepped into here with the Minnesota Vikings. So very, very curious about that. J.J. McCarthy's second surgery is why I'm so intrigued by Daniel Jones. He had that other procedure on his knee. McCarthy has said that it's not a he sounded upbeat. I don't want to put any qualifications on it. He sounded upbeat by it. He says Kevin O'Connell said that he's still on his original timeline to return, so they expect him back for the I believe the beginning of the offseason program next year. So, or for the 2025, next year. It's still 2024. The year's flown by so fast that I've been finding myself losing track of what day, what month, where we are, just because I know we're right around the corner, the final month here in 2024. So. They still expect McCarthy to be back, but there's no certainty about that. You're always leery of re-injury, aggravation. He's been progressing supposedly in the classroom well, but, application on the field can be different. How willing are the Vikings going to be to let him work through those on the field? Do they want to make sure they got him as right as possible? We've seen quarterbacks sit for 3 years, right in the division, Green Bay Packers. That's not uncommon, so it wouldn't be unheard of for them to let McCarthy sit another year, another redshirt season, especially if Jones can return or Darnold returns, whatever, but and shows that they can do what Kevin O'Connell wants in the offense. So, again, it's a very, very intriguing quarterback room, despite the fact that you would think it'd be settled at 10-2 and the way that they've been playing, but it's not. And then, of course, you have to bring that back to the Bears. I have to bring back to the Bears because there's a link of Brian Flores floated out there, Dan Graziani, ESPN, about a potential option for the Bears, who have historically favored defensive-minded head coaches. Flores has a sordid, not sordid, that's the wrong word for it, but he has a mixed past because of the experiences that he had with Miami Dolphins and how Tua Tagovailoa in particular described their relationship. Flores' reputation has since grown from that because players have raved about him, and he said that he's grown from that experience. He showed remorse over how that whole thing went down, how Tua perceived him, all of that. So I'm a big firm believer in second chances, especially when we're talking about sports. We're not talking about like life or death here. That's why, if you've heard, I've argued for Cliff Kingsbury to come in and be the Bears head coach because I'm not sure that what everybody thinks of him is going to be what ultimately is him. I'm not saying that that's, he's ready to turn that corner now. What I'm saying is I feel like it's weird that it's so quick to be written off. And we've seen coaches bounce back and have great successes in their second stints when their first one did not go especially well. So that's where I would keep my eyes at there. Flores to the Bears, just because I think that he does have a good defense. The Bears have seen it, but they've also proven that they can take advantage of it. So it's a matter of, do you feel like what you were able to do against it is unique, or do you look at the body of work and the Vikings defense has given up plenty of yardage, right? They're just they know how to lock it down. Is that something that you want? And then his style, his more authoritative style, is that something that you want to bring in too? While you're trying to, again, rear a young quarterback and navigate the waters of the NFL in a major market like Chicago. Big believer in second chances. I just said that. So I would not be opposed to a Flores team, especially because I'm a fan of aggressive football. And I think that's what the Bears would play if Flores were to be named the head coach. Going over to Denver, we're still talking our heavy stuff here. Bo knows, man. Bo Nix has looked really good, and I want to say it's surprising, but when you were the most experienced college quarterback in the NFL, or coming out of college rather, I think that's probably to be expected. It maybe have taken a little bit longer for it to get going, but I think that might be a result of what was going on around him more than anything else. They didn't have their full starting lineup after week one for like 6 weeks after that, and it took them a little bit of time to figure out a formula of run-pass ratio, which running backs they wanted to use, which receivers should be playing, which tight ends should be playing, and now they've sorted those things out. They've really, really found the strides. Mind you, they were winning because of the strength of their defense before that, right? And so now that you get your defense who's maybe getting a little banged up, Riley Moss missed last week, and it showed very big. I wrote about that for Heavy on Broncos, about how Levi Wallace was getting abused and fans were calling for him to get cut and things of that nature. But now that offense kind of sorted out what they're trying to be, it's still Bo heavy. They're rotating running backs. It's a lot of Cortland Sutton, which it should be. I'm very happy for him. That was another point that I wanted to make. Very happy to see him finally get a quarterback who seems to have settled that spot for the organization. But I do question running back rotations. I guess maybe it's me showing my age, but I am in favor of bell cow backs. Javonte Williams has the look of a bell cow back, does not have the style, at least not anymore, of a bell cow back. Aldrich Estime, same kind of deal, has the look. He has a style of a first and second down runner. I do wonder about third downs and how that's going to work. Jaleel McLaughlin does not look like a first or second down running back, but he seems to have the ability to stand up to it, and he could be a Kyron Williams style guy where it doesn't always look like he can do it. And I think Williams is actually bigger, bulkier than McLaughlin is, so that's still maybe a bad comparison. But the idea is that maybe McLaughlin can handle a larger workload than it seemed like, just from his measurables. And then similarly with Minnesota, Vance Joseph, because of the turnaround that you've orchestrated on the defense and how the players have raved about your simplification making the difference. Wrote about that. Zach Allen has raved about it, right? We've heard Nick Bonito rave about it. Nick Bonito's got 10-plus sacks this season, 11 sacks, I think, at this point on the season. Breakout years under Vance Joseph, who's in his second stint in Denver, but in a lesser role. That's one of those who says you can't go home, right? The taking a step back is not necessarily the worst thing for you. There's a lot of life lessons in Vance Joseph's journey, and I could see that translating into a much different head coach in his second opportunity than what he had when he was in Denver the first time. He's also got experience as a defensive coordinator with Cardinals, so he's been elsewhere and done other things. It's not like he's just been in this kind of vacuum bubble back and forth. There's a lot of experiences to draw from them, and I think that's what organizations are looking for in head coaches, guys who can, again, we hear the Bears get criticized for their assertion they want a leader of men. But I think that's an underrated aspect. You can draw up all the plays you want, right? You can talk well in front of a microphone, in front of a camera, and even in a meeting. But to get up there and lead 53 individuals, get them to rally behind your message, get them to rally behind your vision, get the people working under you to also preach that vision in the same fashion that you are doing so, that takes a leader of men. It's literal. It's not even. That's not even an alliteration or what whatever the word I'm looking for is. That's not even a figure of speech. That's literal. You need a leader of men because that's what's going to happen. You have to get people. You have to be able to galvanize a large group of individuals. You can't even get 5 people to agree on what day it is most of the time. You need a leader of men in the locker room, in an NFL locker room, and so I found that funny. What does that mean? It means what it says. It's not rocket science. It's really not. And so Vance Joseph is a guy who seems to have that kind of a presence. Brian Flores, a guy that seems to kind of have that presence, right? Those are guys that, as defensive coordinators, despite the way the league has trended towards offensive minds, would not surprise me if they were right back in the driver's seat or looking for, or rather, top candidates for head coaching vacancies this coming cycle. Moving on to some non-heavy stuff, the Chiefs, they are 11-1, man, they're rolling, but it's a very uncharacteristic year. It does not seem very Chiefs-like, despite how dominant, quote-unquote, they are on the standings. They don't feel as dominant on the field. They put Mecole Hardman on injured reserve. They got a potential revenge game against the Kadarius Toney coming up against the Cleveland Browns in Week 15, but they got to play the Chargers first, so can't look past that. I'm sure they won't, but it is interesting that they could play a tough Chargers team with that defense playing how it is under Jim Harbaugh and how vulnerable the Chiefs have looked. Like I said, they've been on the brink multiple times this season. To then go to a Browns team that just gave the Broncos all they could handle, who aren't afraid, who have weapons, who have a talented, maybe not consistent or even sturdy defense, but a talented defense that can can take advantage of situations. That's a challenge. That's a back-to-back challenge for the Chiefs, who are trying to make history as becoming the first team in NFL history to win 3 straight Super Bowls. So the road only gets harder from here. Teams only have more information on you, more tape to study, more things to know, and so I don't think it'll get any easier. But I do think that the Chiefs' journey is one that they're probably relieved a little bit to have that perfection streak snapped, but they better be prepared to face all kinds of even unusual challenges along the way, because that just seems like the kind of season that they are having. So, switching gears, talking some NBA stuff. The Chicago Bulls are 10-14 on the season. We're going to run through this rather quickly, but not too quick. I do want to touch on a few notable points. But the Bulls are 10-14. Nikola Vucevic has been building up his trade value back to a double-double guy, shooting the 3-ball very well. Has always been a good team-first guy when he speaks. Maybe doesn't always play like it. Maybe doesn't always show it with his play in that regard, but he's still a very productive player when he is locked in, and that contract looks better when he plays better. It doesn't look great still, but it looks a lot better when he plays better. Conversely, Zach LaVine, I'm not sure that it'll ever change, because what he's shown you, you already know that he can do. I think the question for teams is even if he's showing better defense, better team and team first mentality, whatever you want to call it, better buy-in, whatever, they're going to always wonder what was the impetus. Is you wanting to actually do those things, and are you going to continue to do those things if we acquire you? Or are you merely driven by the fact that you want to get out of where you are, and when you get to your new situation, you'll revert back to the way that you were? That's not what any team wants. So, and he's going to be 30 soon, still makes a lot of money, has an option. So you could trade for him, and then he could say, you know what, I don't like this either, and I'm going to bounce. That's just an ominous situation, or a precarious situation rather, for the Bulls to be in, but that's where they are. Speaking of precarious situations, you traded for Josh Giddey, and he has not looked like anything more than a stat sheet stuffer. Usually we say guys stuff the stat sheet and it's got a positive connotation. For Giddey, I think it's the opposite. I think when you look at his numbers, you could think that, but when you watch him, you know that he's giving up as much as he's getting, and he's also, not helping in other ways. I don't know how to differentiate those two. So maybe they are the same thing now that I hear it out loud. But his defense is not there. They're clearly not winning enough games, even with him on the floor. And you can argue that having him be the lone creator to help uplift other guys is offset by the fact that he does not operate well without the ball. So, I mean, it's a trade that was highly criticized sending Alex Caruso to the Oklahoma City Thunder for Giddey this past offseason, doesn't look much better now that we've seen Giddey play. And now that's not to say Caruso's lit the world on fire, but his team is sitting atop the Western Conference standings right now, while Giddey's is mired in the not the dungeons, but they're in the lower. They're close to the lower levels of the Eastern Conference standings. So I have to wonder if all this is weighing on the organization and Billy Donovan's future. We've heard some murmurs that they could be willing to part ways with him. I feel like he should be willing to go from them. I feel like really though they should be willing to part with each other, because it just has not materialized what they thought it would be. The group on the floor never did. His coaching impact never really has. Even if you could say he's gotten guys to do X, Y, or Z thing, I don't think that it's translated often enough or been impactful enough to make that kind of a difference to sway opinions that he should have some sort of security in the job. The Bulls are not winning. They're not a winning team. They're not a winning roster. They have not constructed a winning roster. But if you're not going to change your front office and you're only going to shuffle around your players, you have to do something more drastic somewhere. And at some point, it just feels like the Bulls and Billy Donovan are doomed to force split. Now, that could just be at the end of this season, especially because it's going nowhere. But it just feels like that's the inevitable way that it will go. On the other side, you got the Atlanta Hawks. 6 straight games, 6 straight wins. 6 straight games sounds funny. 6 straight wins in their last 6 games. The most recent coming over the Los Angeles Lakers in a game that went to overtime and was really, really entertaining. Trae Young won it with a dagger three-pointer that left LeBron James to kind of try to heave desperation three at the end of the clock in overtime. And I've been saying it forever, but Trae's a superstar. And the way superstars prove themselves is we already know he can stuff the stat sheet, right? A la Josh Giddey. He can put up big numbers. Hasn't led to wins as much as he would have liked, admittedly. But now we're seeing that he's also willing to adjust his game for the greater good. He's operating better off ball. He started doing defensive stuff more last year, even really before that, the end of the year before that. But he's locked in on defense. He's playing better off ball. He's more willing to give the ball up. He's not scoring as much because he's not taking as many shots, because he's taking wiser shots, to be honest with you. He's working as a screener. He's doing all these things. He had 30 and 20, and it kind of felt ho-hum, because he wasn't trying to dominate the game unnecessarily like we've seen him do in the past. It was very much an inflow 30 and 21. Even if you want to complain about him taking that final shot and whatever you want to complain about, he had 31 and 20 rather, and 3 turnovers in the game. Trae Young is a superstar. You don't have to like it. Doesn't mean it's not true. Point blank period. Jalen Johnson is adjusting to his more responsibilities. He had foul trouble in the game, still ended up with damn near a triple-double, so you know he's got the talent. The boy's skilled, right? The boy said that when before he got drafted to the Hawks, the boy's got all the skill in the world that you could ever desire in a player of his caliber, of his stature, rather. And he fits the physical profile of the modern NBA archetype that you want. That being said, he's got to learn to play a little bit more under control. The fouls are one thing. He's had some turnover issues. He's had some consistency issues with shooting the ball. That's all to be expected. I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying this is a bad thing. I'm not saying he should be better. I'm not trying to pound the table that he shouldn't be. No, these are things that are going to come with it, but it's also fair to point them out as they are happening, that, hey, this comes from playing a little bit more under control. He had just put on a show in Milwaukee the night before his homecoming with a youth group in attendance. I forget what the specific purpose was, but they were in attendance, and he was doing his thing. Jalen Johnson is uber talented. Just got to play a little bit more under control. Dyson Daniels has proven to still be a streaky scorer. He's alternated double-digit, single-digit scoring performances the past 5-6 games. He was hitting 20-point games earlier in the season. The Hawks need him to get back to that, just so they can have a little bit easier time, not have to exert so much energy and effort. That goes without saying, though. He's still giving you the top-tier quality defense. So, I mean, he's going to impact the game in a positive way more often than he doesn't. Still, like with Johnson's nitpicking, this is nitpicking, but that's what you do when you get to when you start showing that you're talented. You have to find the nits to pick, because you got to keep improving. 1% every single day, right? And for Daniels, it's just trying to find that modicum of consistency. If it's not going to be shooting the ball, which I don't think it will be, make sure that you're getting to the rim and putting pressure on the defense that way, and still putting points on the board, because the Hawks need it, especially if he's going to start. They need him to score. So that's just that. Zachary Richesse, I can't do it. Why am I struggling right now? Risachet. There we go. Zachary Risachet. There. My gosh, that was a struggle and a half. Like, I don't say that every day. Here we go. Last 6 games, 13 points per game, 50.8% from the floor, 42.3% from downtown. Now, we wrote about this in Soaring Down South that he had been struggling shooting the 3-ball. He was still taking good shots, though, and finding other ways to impact the game. Now the 3-ball is falling. He hasn't been rebounding as much, but that outlet is essential for his development, especially like with Daniels, with him staying in the starting lineup. So, and he already defends at an advanced level for a child. I think he doesn't turn 19 until next year, so he's still learning himself as much as he's learning the game of basketball. He does need to improve at the free throw line, 62.6%. I think that'll come with age as he settles in, becomes a little bit more comfortable with the game situations, the moments that he's finding himself in more frequently now. But that is something that I think is very encouraging moving forward. Elsewhere around the NBA, the Lakers now with that Hawks, I think they're 3-7 in their last 10 games. LeBron is talking about he's just happy he gets to play the game he loves. When asked if fans appreciate him, he played well against the Hawks. Him and AD played well. The supporting cast is not good. That roster is poorly constructed, and it looks like the Hawks are going to be the benefactors because they do own the Lakers 2025 first-round pick. So I actually have a tracker up on Soaring Down South X feed, and I put it up on the Facebook. I put up the one for today later on this evening. But it's tracking the pick. The Hawks pick, that's gone. That's going to San Antonio Spurs for the 2022 Murray trade. They have a Kings pick, the Hawks do, coming in at some point supposedly. But that one's not slated to come over this year. And if the Kings don't make the postseason, then it won't come over. Not make the postseason. Finish 13th or higher in the standings, then they won't get the pick. And so that one's the one that we're kind of monitoring the movement on. The Hawks are going to get the Lakers pick, but I'm also tracking that one on the graphic as well, just so we can see where it is day to day. Keep it up to it, because I think it's very interesting just to watch how it fluctuates throughout the year. Sometimes it moves without them even playing, and sometimes it doesn't move when they do play, win or lose. So a lot of good stuff there. The standings. A quick glance at the NBA standings. 2 teams that I think I talked about last year, and now we're seeing it actually come to fruition. Houston Rockets are the number 2 seed in the Western Conference, and the Orlando Magic are the number 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. Now, will both of these teams finish that highly when the season ends? It's possible, because we've seen young teams get hot and stay there the rest of the year. That's highly possible. But my bigger point, and the thing that I'm more doing here, this is a pat on the back, because these are 2 teams that I've talked about repeatedly of how even if they weren't threats in recent years, they were on the way, and they're proving it now. And I think that the way they're constructed, I think that the way they're coached, and I think that their position relative to their competition in their respective conferences, I think gives them an edge that some of the others don't have. They're younger than a lot of teams. The Rockets are in the Western Conference, who are at the top now. There's still some young guys. So I'm not saying that they're going to cruise after a few years, but I feel like they're a team that's still ascending at a pace and at a time, or at a point in their ascension rather, that gives them some runway before they have to actually show and prove who they are. For the Magic, they're probably a little bit ahead of schedule because there's still some flaws in that roster. But they got an advanced guy, one of the I think an up and coming superstar maybe even in Paolo Banchero. They just lost Franz Wagner, so that could be a big blow to them. He's got an oblique injury, he's going to be out indefinitely. That's a big blow. But they're still a team that I think has shown what I said, that they have staying power. They are on the rise, and they are going to be threats in their respective conference for the years to come. So that's going to do it for this episode of Triple Zeros. Be sure to follow me on X at Josh G Buck, on Instagram, and on I guess on Facebook at Josh G Buck. You find that I don't use the Facebook profile that often, so I don't really do that one. But it is on Blue Sky again, the razzle dazzle. But it's all Josh G Buck, and then whatever else you might have to add for that specific platform. Also follow the show at Clocker Sports on all platforms. That's at Clocker Sports, CLOCKERSPORTS. Read the stuff at clockersports.com. That's where all the Bears content is, and that's also the host site, the landing page that I put all the stuff that I write. You can find that right below the Bears section, but that's also heavy on Broncos, heavy on Vikings, heavy on Bulls, Lakers, Knicks, random NBA for the heavy stuff. For the Hawks, though, that is at soaringdownsouth.com. Also, check out the YouTube channel, like I said, at Clocker Sports, TikTok, Clocker Sports, all that great stuff. And, of course, until the very next time, man, you already know what it is. I'm gone.